Okay, and we are live. So, hello everyone, welcome. So, for all of us here, it's a Thursday evening. For Irina, even a little bit later, at least like a little bit later than for us. So, I'm super happy because today we have a constellation about a topic that I was always looking for to really dive deeper, and so we can already see it like in the subline from Antonia. So what we will talk about today. So I mean, the good thing is so today we are three people who are, I would really say, are passionate about to bring really good products into the world, and so but we are not, let's say, all of us has stepped back to, let's say, go in the, let's say, in a specific kind of, not, let's say, the classic product role, so like in a different role to support this whole thing. And I think this is super interesting. And so before I tell even more, so I would like to have my guests introduced. So Irina, maybe do you want to start quickly, introduce yourself?
From Romania, started coding really early. Data is the red thread of the career, regardless of what I did. I really like algorithms and optimizations as well. What else? Ex-Google, lived in 3 countries. And yeah, I'm a jack of all trades. I can cover a lot of things.
That's good.
And
That's good.
that's how I mean, internet is power. So LinkedIn, that's how I got to know Timo and Antonia, which you go next.
Brought us here. Yeah. Antonia, what about you?
Yeah, I'm a product ops consultant and coach, and yes, we exist. I have quite an eclectic background. I'm originally from Switzerland. My family's Italian, lived a while in Scotland, which you might be able to hear. I have 3 cats from 3 different countries. I started as a games tester, somehow got into product, somehow got into product ops, and I'm very excited to be here today.
Yeah, that's great. First of all, thanks that you both are here. And so, because as we said, so we basically met each other over LinkedIn. So Irina and myself already for a longer time. So we always were sending us voice messages, which is still really weird to do this with this LinkedIn because they cut it off, I think, after a minute or not
1
even
minute,
like that. Yeah. So and we exchanged a lot of things, and so and let's say fate brought us all together here, and I like to, so let's first start. I like to pick it up, Antonio, what you said, because I mean, the interesting thing, at least like a common thing about data and product is usually no one starts there. So it's no one is coming up with a plan to basically, okay, I want to go there. And so what was the step for you to go into product and to start out there?
Into product, honestly, I was working at a 10-person startup. So it was impossible to not be close to everything. And I think at some point somebody said, hey, you've got really good product sense. And I was like, what is that? We didn't even have a PM, right? We had a CEO who was automatically the PM and who would do all of these things. And as I progressed through different startups doing QA and setting up sort of QA processes for them, I got closer and closer to this thing called product. And I realized this is actually really what I want to do. So eventually I did hatch a small plan to get there, but I think it was never even on my radar when I was younger, for example.
Yeah. What was the point where you just said, so you really felt that you belong there? What was the point, or what was this specific kind of feeling? I'm just asking because I had similar things. So
I mean, belong there, I'm not sure I got that until quite late on, when I was already doing product at a couple of different companies. I think at a certain point, I was fulfilling that role without having the title or without being officially called that, right? And it was funny because other people came to me for product decisions. And at the time, I didn't realize what that meant or, what the implications of that were. But we were all working together really well. And I eventually left that startup, and somebody gave me their old copy of Inspired. And they were like, I think this is going to be really good for you. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. What is this? And I realized, like, hold on, this is what I've been doing this entire time. But belonging, I think that took quite a few years.
Okay, that's nice. The interesting thing is like Inspired comes up a lot. So for people in context, so Inspired is the book by Marty Kagan, basically one of the grandfathers of product management, or at least like modern product management. And yeah, I guess a lot of people have read that. And it was same for me. It was the first book as well. So I even was lucky enough that I had in my first job, which was called product manager. It was at Audible, and like in the first week, we had a 1-week workshop with Marty Kagan at Audible in New York. That was the perfect start. So after that, there was no go. Okay, it's not hard to say not going back because I went away after some point to venture over into data, but.
But do you ever really go away from product?
No,
I've been thinking about this, right? Like once you have this product mindset, you kind of apply it in everything you do.
Oh, you just have to show me a really, let's say, a not well-designed onboarding process, and I basically go crazy.
I mean, it's the same with data at the end. Like if you see things in this way, I mean, I didn't have a classic, like I didn't study data. I studied algorithms and optimization.
And where did it start for you? I mean, like, how did you then ended up in something which we now would call data?
My third job, so not even on the first. So I did start a PhD, and then I realized it doesn't have an impact. But I really like the stuff that I am studying in university that's related to statistics and patterns and information retrieval. And then I went as a generalist IT consultant. So I was coding, I was collecting data from APIs. I was like, that's all right. And then in another company, I was again kind of jack of all trades, but I got more into data. There was a cool problem where Panda updates and what happens to different websites depending on the type, how they get ranked after the update. And I did a clustering on that. I was like, I learned this in school. I want to apply this here. And like, oh, look, it's proving exactly what these big guys are saying on LinkedIn. And like, it's confirmation. And then the next job I actually got as a data analyst, this is for me. This is where I want to go. And I think the rest is history. This was quite long. Yeah, I don't know, 26, something like that, 27, somewhere around there. And then it just naturally, and then you get inspired to, add skills and learn more and learn more. I think in the next role, I learned tracking, and I was implementing tracking. And I was like, oh, this is cool. I think we were using Perl for that. And I learned Perl on the job.
Okay.
Long time ago. It's 12 years.
It might be still around. So I think there's still people hate it because at least like you can find when you see people who did Perl in the past, they are very passionate about it. So it's
definitely the backend guys at that company were very passionate. So I learned tracking by going at 5 p.m. and like, let's drink a beer, teach me what you're doing. More. So that's where. And after that, I mean, it made sense with the cloud adoption that you get to data engineering and ML in production and all the other parts.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is like, at least like for both of you, was really like kind of by accident. But I think the interesting thing is like this, and that it might be really like, so if you go into a startup, you really have this possibility that in the end, or let's say smaller company, that you can come across different kind of roles and then figure out, okay, wow. I even know people who ended up in sales by that, who never thought to end up in sales, but they were just like, okay, you have to do it. And actually it's fun. And so, and go ahead, sorry.
Just was very funny. Data analyst was put in the backend team, in the backend engineering team somehow back in that day, not in a separate team or under operations or marketing. So that's how I got to learn a lot of technical skills in the role.
You might be lucky with that. So I think the worst case would be if it would be under CFO or so, then.
Yeah, then you would. Backend is to learn a lot of stuff.
So one thing, so I definitely want to venture into products up in a second, but I want to put something in between, which I always ask, because like I'm very curious now. We already discussed like generating ideas, and I always want to hear some new stuff. So the one question for you, like, is there one thing, let's say in data or in product, a tool, a concept, an idea that you discovered this year that really surprised you or made you really excited, or on the other hand, totally disappointed you because like it was a lot of hype, you looked into it and was like, okay, I don't know. Antonia, do you have an idea what that could be?
So I work a lot with frameworks, for better or for worse. And actually something I rediscovered this year was user story mapping. And on the face of it, I learned it quite early on in my career. I'm like, okay, solid, got this like in my backpack of techniques, whatever. But to a certain extent, it always felt almost a little bit basic, right? I love it. But I looked into it again this year and I started realizing, obviously now with the experience that I've gained since the last time I looked at it, I started realizing just how much you can actually do with user story maps and how it can help you map out your research, how it can help you define the measures of success for specific initiatives, right? How you can use it for something very small or for entire product lines. So that was actually really wonderful to sort of rediscover this kind of, old quote unquote concept and to still really see the validity in it and to feel that this is actually something really powerful.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good one. Irina, what's your, I don't know, discovery or non-discovery?
One came from you. I think Double Loop came from you, and I was trying to help some product tribes to tie their KPIs together because different tribes would push KPIs in different directions, and some of them are completely opposing. And kind of trying to make them see how they influence those KPIs. Unfortunately, there was not much adoption, but I would say due to a lot of being busy and not having time to think about creativity. So there was no product ops. That's why. So there was a lot of. And the other one was Infer, this low-code ML tool. I don't want to give them too much a plug because I love them already to bits. So basically, you can write a causal inference in one line, and then you got it. And I love causal inference because I know what the value that it can bring in measurement. So I would say those that kind of led to desire to standardize ways of product measurement of certain initiatives.
Yeah. The double loop thing is interesting because like it made a similar thing that Antonia, what you said, like on my end, that I was rediscovering basically how to create metric trees or metric, let's say, nodes or maps and so on. Because like I was experimenting with this, I think 5 or 6 years ago, and never really happy with the outcome and so on. But then I had a session with Dan, and so where he showed me all the different kind of things. So he's one of the founders of the tool. And then it really made click for me. It was like, oh, this was the missing piece that was missing 6 years ago. And so this is nice too, that this kind of things then come up and reappear.
Yeah, they come back into your life.
The discovery of that tool, then I was also thinking, because some of the product tribes are completely new, makes perfect sense to introduce the tool as they were building the metric trees, KPI trees.
Once you understand it, it's a really powerful tool. The understanding is a bit, which might bring us. So I really want to go into the product ops topic. So because like I think it's super interesting. So from my background, so of course like we have ops everywhere. So I think the first time that I discovered ops in some way was DevOps. So like I have a software background. I was involved in some of these kind of projects, and at some point I came around a company which has DevOps. And so I was reading the Phoenix project to understand a little bit more, which is like a good book to get started with DevOps, really good book. Also like the follow-up, I think it's the Unicorn project. I don't know, so there's a follow-up, Unicorn. Yeah. So both are really good, also like really to understand what operations can really bring into this. Let's say they're from a software perspective. And then the interesting thing is like that ops always like was appearing a little bit in other disciplines as well, but it never really got so strong that it really made it, let's say, that it was a natural thing to always sit there. So I talked to people with marketing ops, and it was totally wild. So everyone was basically doing something else in their job, but they all were called marketing ops. Data ops, the same. So yes, it's there, and there are people, actually people doing this, but it's not really like established. And of course, like I was always super curious when I'm not sure when I read about product ops for the first time. It was maybe really 2 or 3 years ago, at least like somewhere as an idea. But I was always looking out to find people who actually go into this, because like it would be really interesting. Because like, I mean, I have an idea what I think what it is, but I mean, you are basically kind of like you're coaching, you do consulting about this. So
yeah,
let's say for someone who's not really like in product, but also like for people who are in product. So like, how do you define it? So what's the role? So what should product ops do? And I know it's easy to say.
Oh, don't worry. I get this question all the time, so I'm well rehearsed. So I actually had a few different definitions as I grew with the discipline as well. I started trying to sell it as, I just make your life as easy as possible. You know, like PM, you're my customer, I make your life easy. Not always true, right? Sometimes I make it a little bit harder in order to make it a lot easier later on. Yeah. Nowadays, I like to talk about enabling product management excellence. Now, what product management excellence is a whole other topic, right? But basically speaking, we're talking about delivering customer value in a way that benefits the business in a timely fashion. Yeah, so I think that's kind of my definition for product ops. The difficulty with that is that enabling function looks different at every single company, because the barriers to that excellence can be very different at every different company, right? It could be a low product management maturity. It could be low access to data, right? Low data literacy, for example, not closing feedback loops, not actually getting customer feedback and actioning it, etc., etc. It could be silos, right? It could be culture and communication. So what the day-to-day of a product ops manager looks like can be very different. But broadly speaking, I think we all have this mission of enabling product excellence.
Okay, I think this is a good start. Irina, I know that, I mean, you spend a bunch of time, let's say, on the other side with product analytics to really work close with product teams. Yeah. So did you came across, let's say, the role, or I mean, you often come across the role without that the role is named like this. So I think like the intersection is always there.
I would say that I mean, just like you, first I found out about DevOps, of course, like everyone, because I studied engineering. At Google, though, we had an organization that was helping the sales department, was called Sales Ops, that was doing kind of what product is doing, but for the sales product. So making sure that the CRM tools work, that every area of the globe, every continent measures things the same way with the same methodology, that we measure success for certain initiatives in UK and in Germany and US in the same way. So that was a very close partnerships while we were working on global optimizations. And this guy was like amazing. He was going and fixing everything everywhere and making sure that everything falls on a tact, you know, and organized with everyone and connecting multiple teams. And I see this very similar to the product ops. I mean, it was just more internal support sales that sell product to external Google customers. And that's where I encountered it first. Now, after Google, I would say that I haven't met the product ops person or haven't really worked with one, but I see the lack of that standardization and measurement, and that sometimes falls in different teams. And it would be amazing if I would have another, bless you, Scott, that was somebody like that, to do that kind of work, because otherwise it usually falls within the responsibility of the person who's most interested in that type of quality, of measurement of excellence, right? Who wants to push for this? It depends who's less busy and who's more impacted by non-standardization, if you want. buy silos and so on. And in some companies I worked with, maybe I was responsible for 5 tribes and all of them doing different things and maybe not sharing the work in between and the measurement styles. So I'd be like, guys, you need this and you need that, and that measurement is done there, that's better, let's do it that way. So I see the need for it. That's why I support the existence of product ops. And Antonia, please come in the next place, wherever I will work.
You can make it as a requirement. So like, my hiring requirement is the following. So like, these are the workshops that we have to do and so on. So
I think that you're touching, sorry.
No, go ahead. It's okay.
You're touching on a really interesting point, right? Like this type of work always exists. Like there are endless debates on LinkedIn about, do we need product ops? Product ops exists, whether you like it or not, right? Now, whether you need a full-time person to manage this is debatable, right? It's not always necessary, depending on your maturity, how you've started your organization, etc., etc. But product ops exists. Like, these tasks have always existed. We haven't created new tasks, right? What this role is doing is looking at this holistically, right? It's almost like internal service design.
Yes, yes. Making things run smoothly internally for the external purpose,
I mean, the funny thing is, like, when I listen to you, and I know other people in other ops, or let's say roles, and Irina, what you just said about sales ops, I know these people as well. So like, everyone is super happy when they're like the kind of most, no, I would say in most of the time they're really super happy, but it's always so hard to establish this for some reason. So it's not like, for me, it's always like the question, because like everything what you said, I mean, this making you better, introducing excellence. I mean, this should tick so many boxes. So they say making better in the internal PM team, excellence then maybe to other teams. So like, of course, like a sales team wants to have an excellent PM team, because like then, I mean, they can sell more. All sounds like a great idea. So in the end, it should be a no-brainer. So what is the stuff that holding teams back? Is it just that they say, okay, we don't want to hire someone explicitly for that? Or is it just like, I mean, as you said, the things are already there, so you just have to, I mean, could just say, okay, someone please focus on these topics also. So what is holding product teams back?
To adopt product ops, I think there are a few different things. I mean, obviously part of it is always going to be budgeting, right? It's an enabling role. It's not a role that creates anything by itself. So that the case to introduce this whole new salary might be more difficult to make than the case for another engineer. But I think once an organization does take that step, a lot of it then comes down to having a strong mandate to actually make meaningful changes, right? And not just be everybody's personal assistant. And having the trust that is necessary. I think in product ops, a lot of it can sometimes feel like a bit of a power struggle, right? Because there might be people that have the misconception that product ops is there to tell them how to do their job, right? Product ops is there to just introduce processes ad nauseum until everybody's dead from it. Product ops is there to take things away from people, right? Because some PMs are quite passionate about this, like we said, because it's always needed to get done, and maybe that's kind of their baby. And now you have a unified function that oversees all of that. That might be threatening to some people, right? And I think it's those things that often make a new product ops role fail, more than do we need this role, don't we need this role?
And also, just as the same question as it is in the data teams, how do you show value? Which KPI do you measure to show that the product ops you just hired is doing things better for the company? What do you actually measure? Speed, maybe, yes. Speed of decisions, yes. How do you measure efficiency, really? How do you measure the feedback loop or the
Yeah,
It
super
fits
interesting.
quite well because like Ivan just posted a question where he was asking what would be a good OKR for a product ops team to pursue without discussing the, let's say, if OKRs is a good idea or not. So let's say what could be like a good objective, or like let's say or where you want to go or where you want to present. Okay, this is like how we bring value.
I mean, it's super tough, right? And I think something that we need to be realistic about is that to a certain extent, measures in product ops are always going to be imperfect, right? I can enable people to speak to customers more frequently, right? I can make that a lot more frictionless. I can measure how often PMs speak to customers, for example. That's something very tangible, right? That's data I should be able to get quite easily. Now, the implication is that that makes us produce better products. Whether that implication is true or not, right? That's the thing that's tough to measure. I can measure my initiatives. I can measure if people read the newsletter, if people engage more in meetings, if, how many initiatives are based on customer feedback, things like that. It's actually not very hard to measure those things. And you can measure like ENPS, essentially. You can measure whether PMs themselves feel like they're progressing, like their work life is getting better. But ultimately, there is always this kind of inherent assumption that what we're doing ultimately helps us produce better products. But making that link is extremely hard.
Yeah,
I mean, it brings one problem up. I mean, in the end, like even if you take product ops apart, measuring if product team makes a great job is already super hard.
Yes,
because
exactly.
So I don't know, Irina, how do you do that? So like, let's say from the data side.
Yeah, I mean, I had one idea while Antonia was speaking that maybe you could measure, the number of tracking tickets or A/B tickets, A/B tests that have been properly implemented and ended. Right? Usually when you don't have alignment in how different teams do these things, you're going to have a lot of mess and garbage and tracking and whatnot, or failed A/B tests that didn't, were not set up correctly. So you could measure it in that one. I would also say, for product people, it's very easy to prove value if you create new features. For marketing people, it's if they spend more money. For product ops, it's not about spending money. It's actually about like tweaking things and maybe minimizing the cost. So maybe it's also like the cost of bad tracking or wasted time. I don't know, FTEs.
Yeah, I mean, time is definitely a measure, right? You can say, I have saved this and this amount of time. You can kind of extrapolate that. But you do end up having almost philosophical discussion. Like, let's say you're revamping the onboarding process for new PMs, right? Okay, so you reduce the time for them to become effective. Yeah. What does effective mean? What are the markers of that, right? Like it comes almost into the philosophical of, okay, well, what is this excellence? How do we measure this? How do we measure that somebody is doing well, actually?
I mean,
No, go ahead, sorry.
No, I'm thinking of this sales ops example. So we were working with a customer CRM where everybody was putting their internal optimizations and something like, I pitched X and this raised, I don't know, the customer spend more in marketing or... And it was just a jungle of everybody putting their stuff together and nobody trusted anything that was in it. And as a result, when there was an optimization initiative coming from US Global, they were like, I don't know what this is. It looks like just the other garbage that I see there already. And what Sales Op did was basically cut access, clean up, communicate this whole thing, and saying from now on, there are only 5 people in the world that are allowed to actually put optimizations because we want to filter for quality. As a result, you had a higher implementation rate of those optimizations and a higher trust rate. So you could also measure something maybe in that direction somehow, like less, more trust, because there is somebody in the background that does all of these verifications for you and makes sure that whatever goes in is clean, and I can pick it up anytime and it's clean. Maybe.
One question is like, who's usually sponsoring a product's ops, let's say motion, role, whatever? Is it something that comes bottom up, or is it really like something like, I don't know, team lead, head of product has the feeling, okay, there's something we need to do?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the interesting things. So when I talk a lot about product ops, and when I tend to talk about it to people for whom it's quite new, individual PMs up to a head of product level get it almost immediately because they really feel the pain, right? They're the people like who this would affect the most. They're like, yes, I wish I had a person like this in my team. Once you start going to VP level, CPO level, who are actually the people with the checkbook, right? It becomes a lot more fuzzy for them. And I have a hypothesis that it's purely because they don't really feel that pain as acutely. Sometimes the thing that we are advocating for are things that maybe they feel are just part of being a PM, right? So there is this kind of disconnect between the people on the ground that really feel the need for it and the people who ultimately have the power to make it happen that kind of, it's a nice to have. Like, unless you're really tuned into product excellence and you really are on the pulse and want to make it happen and it's your ambition to have the best products team, right? Not really that necessary.
Yeah.
I would say this is like the ML ops or the data ops trend as well. It is needed to standardize the way you put things in production. Yet nobody has it. And I mean, it's all the responsibility usually falls on the one that's actually most invested in the outcome of those ML models in that case.
Yeah.
But still, that's measurable. What you're saying is not measurable, so it's still hard. It's more.
So I think the interesting thing is like with DevOps, there might be a long time where DevOps was already there and was struggling in a similar way. I think the breakthrough moment for them was like when cloud came around, and so you basically don't have to go somewhere and put a server rack somewhere and to wire it up and then install something or so. So where you basically could automate, and I know like when I was switching from one organization which didn't have DevOps and then one that had, it was really what it came down was like that. Let's say for developers to get environments where they can do stuff. So let's say to do something locally, then provision something already, let's say some kind of pre-stage. And so by that, in the end, reducing the time until something goes down into production or goes out into production. So, and this, of course, like in the end was a no-brainer for most of the people, even very up, because like they could understand, oh, we can ship faster. Sounds good.
Yeah.
But I can see, like, I mean, in product sometimes it's not even like a good thing if you ship fast. Sometimes yes, but not always. So maybe to take a little bit of a turn, because like, I mean, the reason why I started this kind of show was like, because, and this is something which I think Irina and I already like talked about on other channels as well. It's like the frustration why, so I'm a product analyst and worked in product analytics for 12, 15 years. So because I started out in product, and data was always like, it was not the only impact. So I was using qualitative data as well. I was using, I don't know, different kind of approaches to do the things. But event data, in the end, event data was always nice because like I had something that could produce very fast feedback loops. And so we could test pretty quickly, and we get it in a standardized format. So it's not so hard to do it. So for me, it was a no-brainer. And I basically punished every data team that I was leading to do this stuff. So not always to big joy, but people had to do it because like I wanted to do it. So the big miracle for me was like, why is it not a standard approach for product teams to use event data to do these kind of things, or in the end go a step further, Irina, what you already said, like using experimentation and let's say the event data, let's say connected to that, to basically make fast iterations on specific kind of things. So I can totally get when you develop something totally new or take a new direction that you might do it differently, but especially like when you already have something out, you want to iterate, you want to improve this stuff. I mean, then like going this way, like experimentation, using event data, it gives you so much speed to do this, and validation, and I don't know, trust. So, and I was always hoping that when something like product ops becomes the standard, then we have the bridge to connect this. So what do you think?
Yes, exactly. No, I mean, honestly, people are scared of data. Like, people in product are scared of it because it's so inaccessible in most companies, right? And even I'm not confident around data. I have to be brutally honest. And I think it's the fact that, honestly, most of the companies I worked in did not have a solid like data structure. Like, they were measuring the bare minimum, but constantly being overrun by random requests, most of the time from the C-suite, let's be honest. And they just weren't able to actually do everything they needed to do to have the solid structure to enable people to access it in a super easy way, right? Like, I remember being a PM and having to like bug somebody for an entire week until I was even able to log into our data dashboard, right? That shouldn't happen. And that's why I feel so strongly about this now being in product ops, because I see like just how much data can supercharge, right? Being a good PM. But this access to the data and the literacy for like product managers to actually have access to the data, look at it, analyze it, and know what to do with it is so low. Like, it's actually stunning. You know, we talk about data-driven product management all the time.
Supported, not driven, not driven, supported.
You can also do driven. Depends on how you do it.
Yeah, it's just not the reality for most of us, honestly.
I agree with you there. So, but I'll tell you a story of Ouroboros, because it keeps biting its own tail and it comes back again and again. So say, you don't have a proper data event tracking setup. It's messy, it's dirty. As a result, and that's because you do not have processes. As a result, you have data that PMs don't trust, and the analysts probably also do not, and have to always go back and check it for you because of the quality. And then you want to put processes in place for this, but then again, you will have a lot of reluctance to set up processes for tracking because you're taking freedom. How do you solve this chicken and egg, right? You have to have quality, but for quality, you have to have processes. It's a very tough way of working. Like, it has, for this, I would say you need support from above. No, it cannot be something bottom up. It has to be top down.
It cannot be an afterthought. Absolutely. No. I think that's the biggest mistake most startups make. They just sort of start doing it a little bit, right? But in data, that is damnable. Like, it's very hard to come back from that.
So yeah, it's very hard to come back from not trusting the data. PMs not trusting the data. That's an uphill battle of 1.5 years, let's say, if everything is optimal, and it's not. So I would say that is the divide, and it's trust. And I completely understand your point of view. And if you see that you don't trust the data and it's always something fails and they go back and fix it, why would you invest in your own literacy when you don't trust it? And in the end, everybody ends up working a little bit like, measure like this a little, and let's go on. I think there is a desire for literacy. I think there is not enough time for literacy because you do not have ops.
Yeah. And maybe it's also like because you don't really have ops, so it's not like so, because everything what you just described is really interesting. So first of all, I never feel confident in data as well. So it's a natural state.
Me neither. But
sometimes I build setups. So let's say if I have some specific data where I know we build a lot of decisions on, then I can really invest to come to a level where I feel quite confident, where I don't have to check because I know I have all the bells and whistles in place that I would know if something is wrong. But this is a lot of effort to get there, and I usually make a very, very good decision where I apply this kind of stuff. For everything else, I do the same thing. I mean, I think maybe the only difference that I have to, let's say, a normal PM is like, I know how to double check. So Because I went into presentations with data where I was 100% convinced that this is the right thing. And afterwards, I figured out it was not. I made a mistake.
Yeah.
I just picked the wrong event. The event was not tracked properly. I did some wrong assumptions and so on. And so I had to go back and say, honestly, what I just told you 2 hours ago is totally wrong. So it's, and you do this one time, you don't do it for the next time. So then you start to learn what kind of things you can do to be sure. But this constant state of I have to check, not nice. And this comes. This is what I mean, like from ops side, from the data point, because like this is then missing. I think from my experience in the data point, I mean, it's also like a secondary thing. No one is really thinking about this. Like there's no process on the data side, or let's put it on the data side. There's not really like a process in place to handle this as well. So even like if you would have a very motivated product ops team, I sometimes have the feeling that on the other side there's no one there who can basically take it on, because like they are all building dashboards for I don't know weird reasons or so.
Yeah, but I mean it's also.
No, I wanted to make a joke that the product ops is like the TÜV, the German TÜV. You go, they check it for you, they check your car for you. You don't know what exactly they did, but they assure you it's fine and you can run with it for another year. And you're safe.
I think a big part.
No, go ahead, Antonia. It's fine.
Sorry. I think a big part of this is also just the usability of a lot of data tools and products, right? Like I log into a dashboard. It took me a week to finally get my login data. Like 14 people asked me why I need this. I finally get to the step where I'm allowed to log in, and now I'm presented with 400 filters. None of them make any sense to me. And what am I supposed to do with this? Like it is really overwhelmed, right? And I think this isn't actually something we can just fix on the product side or just on the data side. I think this really requires us to work together closely.
Yeah, 100%.
This has to do with the workload as well. So about 3-4 years ago, I was in a company where I had enough time to actually sit with the data consumers, which is PMs, sales in that case, and see how they interacted with the dashboards. And like, did you download it? Did you wrangle it and aggregate it in another way? Then I need to provide you the data in that form. And then you adapt, and then you have happy data consumer, data stakeholders. Then all of the changes that product ops bring are also part of change management. And people are reluctant to change to processes like, oh, this is going to hurt. It's going to take a long time. It's going to slow me down. And I think in a company where you have this like deliver, feature after feature after feature, and you fill those 8 hours with just like delivering of things that I can show how the value of those things are, because they're easy to show, it's a new feature. And if you're busy at the end, you don't have that extra space for optimization of your workload. I don't know, what do you think?
100%. That's the USP of product ops, right? Like that's what makes me so angry. Like that, okay, fine, you are busy delivering, but then let somebody else take care of these things that are foundations. They're not a nice to have. This is how you get work done. This is how you run your company. This should not be an afterthought in data or product.
No, I fully agree. Yeah. So, I mean, you have to have enough bandwidth as a data analyst to actually support the people who consume your data and understand how, and then go back and redesign it. And as a product manager, you have to have enough time to not just be busy and to think creatively, what could you improve and optimize in your workflow?
Exactly.
I mean, the interesting thing is like, if you really, let's say, if you have a person who's taking the product ops role, I think the opportunity there, at least like for data, is like that you then have at least like you have a one first touch point that you can exactly discuss all these different kind of things. And so you don't really have this group of 20 people, let's say scared 20 people who are sitting there, oh my God, how's this dashboard working? So you have one person or maybe 2 or 3 person, but definitely at least less. And you can really, I mean, this might be really like the big opportunity that you can really then go there and can say, okay, we just want to solve your case. And I mean, like since the product ops people already want to solve, want to facilitate, and want to let's say, make the life easier. So this might be easier to talk to this kind of person than talk to the whole product team. And which is really, I mean, I did product team workshops. It's, oh my God, these were the hardest workshops I ever did, because like, I could really feel I'm losing the room after 10 minutes.
Oh no, what a shame.
Yeah, no, yeah, and I tried different kind of ways, and it was really frustrating, because like, I don't know, but because I knew it was of course it was my fault, because I was not finding the right way, or I didn't really find the right trigger point to build this bridge that they can go there.
Yeah.
And I think, like, after we're now talking a little bit, I think I have some ideas which I might did wrong. So for example, I didn't really ask them, okay, what are you scared of? So for me, it was like simple, it's just math, so it cannot be so hard. But I think like that there are so many steps before that makes it so hard. Something that I totally missed.
Yeah, and like I think for us in product, data is ultimately a means to an end, right?
Yeah.
And it takes acute awareness of both disciplines to be able to say, this is the data, and this is the end goal. This is what you can do with it. These are all the amazing insights you can get from this, right? I think that is incredibly difficult, though.
Yeah, and I always hope, like, for example, this is like one thing that I'm always try to do is, like, when I talk to data people, is like learn from product. So like, so I was just talking, well, like we had this panel this week with where Che from Apple was there, who's doing experimentation. And so he has this take that every data person, basically, if they support product teams, they have to learn to think how product people think, because like only then they come as close as possible to understand where the stuff is missing and so on.
Interesting.
And what I'm always trying to bring into this is like, when you hand something over, try to, let's say, make it accessible and let's say as a good user experience as possible. And so this is something what you can learn from product, because like this is what product people can do. So for example, in your case, or my usually case is like, if you dump 200 events into an analytics tool and let product people figure out which one they should use, it cannot work. So it's there's already a design problem. And so, but data is then always, I think, often not bold enough to say, hey, we do this. We want to design, so we want to make it good for you. And because like data is often like, oh, look, we have such a hard job, so we just, if you want to track it, we track it. So we take everything which is coming in there. Oh, I don't know, Irina, do you have other ideas to limit that?
No, I wanted to add that the collaboration between data and product also relies very much on the leadership of those two teams. Usually you have technical design and product under the CTO, and then the data team usually falls on the CFO, COO, CMO, and so on, CEO, so forth. And there's a misalignment there in the tech part of it. I mean, just a thought that maybe collaboration could be improved by also bringing the data team under the CTO, though I'm not a fan of being under the CTO. I think it should be under business. But for alignment, for operations, it should be.
One thing that is definitely true, and I see it in data teams, is like, and also like one of the things that I'm always try to preach is like, doing data for product is something totally different than doing data for BI. BI has totally different kind of problems, totally different kind of needs. And if you take a data team that is supporting BI and let them support product, it's basically set up for failure. It cannot really work, because like you have to understand totally different kind of things. So for product events are super important, sequences, identifiers. So you have to make sure that identifiers work. So these are all concepts that you don't care about on the BI side, because like there's often just baked in. So you don't really have to take care of an identifier, you just have to take care of a foreign key or so. I think this is also like often like, I guess, which can be better on the data team side, to have at least like one or two people who really understand, okay, this is product data.
I mean, usually from what I have seen in my personal experience, product analytics is actually not product analytics. It's a mix of multiple things. Very rarely do I see a product analyst purely focused on tracking and experimentation. And I think that's better that way, to be purely focused, because when you go from I don't know, doing retention drivers by the same person who does A/B testing. It's just not the same. No, you can't go deep in any direction.
True. Yeah. I mean,
But I
this
mean,
is something. Yeah. Sorry.
I think there is also a little bit of responsibility on the individual PMs. Like I worked at a startup that A/B tested everything. ABCD tested everything, right? And part of writing a good ticket was, these are the events that I need, right? That was a non-negotiable. We needed that. We needed to be on top of that, because otherwise all the work we did would just go out the window, because you couldn't accurately track, which variant performed better or not. So I feel like, again, like in product management, we're always preaching, oh, data is important, look at the data. But really, how much do we as product managers actually do to make that a reality? I think there's a little more we could do.
That's a good point. I think it goes to both sides. Yeah.
I haven't seen yet a product ticket that says I want these events, or if I did, it's very rare.
Oh, I know, I can tell you. So interestingly, so for example, like, so what really had a big impact on me was like when I was working, let's say, on Audible, where we had to do Amazon stuff and so on. So like, you cannot deploy there something which doesn't run through feature flagging and testing. So like it's just like there's no way. So there's no deployment path for you to go out. So, and this always involved that you set these things up, because like you had to set up metrics. So you had to prove actually this kind of feature can be dialed up to 100%. And if you didn't have proof, it was never dialed up. It was just kicked out after 6 weeks, even when you worked on it for a year or so. So it was basically like it was like going into a club. So there was like a very, very hard door, and you just had really like to bring the right things with you to get through this door. And this really helped. And this really helped also like a lot of teams to think about this stuff, even when it was not definitely in their nature to think about it.
I like
and
this.
that brings back to ops. So because like this is something which at least like operations can really introduce. Say, okay. Really good
Another
point.
area.
So
yeah. I would throw another wrench, and I would say like tooling. That was something else that the sales ops guys used to do, like evaluating the tools and the usage and how much and why, which features for internal use, basically for like I don't know. I would ask Antonia, would you see product ops also responsible for, I don't know, seeing how amplitude is used, seeing how snowplow, seeing how doing trainings on how to use certain tools?
Absolutely. I think for me, tool enablement is as much part of managing the tool stack as anything else. And it's one of those things, like, honestly, when I tell people, like managing the product tool stack is a core part of doing product ops, they're like, oh yeah, but like you just talk to a vendor once a year, you make sure everybody has licenses, like that's it. But no, it's how do you set up that tool? How do you connect it to every other tool you have in the company? How do you train people on how to use that tool successfully, right? Especially with something like Amplitude. How do you connect it? How do you set it up? Who is responsible for that? How do all the different teams interact with it? Like, it's a huge undertaking. And it's so often overlooked when you don't have a dedicated ops person.
Yeah, because at least like you can really place at least one part of the ownership there. I mean, and this is also what I tell clients is like, you need ownership. So if they come to me, oh, this tool doesn't really work for us, it doesn't provide any kind of value, we want something cheaper, or I don't know, I would always say like, well, I'm pretty sure that you're just not using it in the right way. So this should provide the value that you don't really have to think about this kind of, let's say, money that you spend on it. But it's what you just said, like there's often like not even one person who's taking care of it. That's a good point. So I'm really hoping that at least like people watching this now get an idea to think about, hey, product ops. At least I will bring this up quite more often, because like, I mean, I often work with product teams from the data side of things. And so we often have this question. So at least like this question comes up. It's like, okay, what can we do on our side to ensure that we can develop a specific kind of level, specific kind of quality. And I think like I would definitely point them to product ops to say this could be something. I would be like closing with something which can have something to do with product or data, but doesn't have to be. So let's a quick rapid fire round. And I take these, and you usually have different kind of questions there, but this time it's definitely influenced by things that Irina is usually posting on LinkedIn. So I would like to start with, let's say, a good fiction book that both of you would recommend.
Ooh.
I'm really bad with this because most of the stuff I read is actually work related.
It's totally fine. The non-fiction question comes in a second, so you can just say pass.
I'm reading one that's really, I'm ready to be surprised. So it's by a Polish writer. It's Olga Tokarczuk.
Okay.
And it means, oh my God, I don't know how to translate it. Take your plow over the bones of the dead. But it's like, it doesn't sound as grim as it sounds. It's a bit of fantasy and a bit of a police type of novel,
Okay.
and very unusual writing style and very modern. She got the Nobel for literature in 2018. So that's what I'm reading now. And it's a kind of a detective magic, poor Polish, East European type novel.
So all this would tick boxes for me. I think the only way I would be careful is like with the Nobel Prize, but I might come back to you to ask. Okay, that's good.
Sticker that says Nobel on it.
Yeah, okay. Antonia, so when you say non-fiction books, so what would be a non-fiction book that you would recommend?
Well, I can recommend you one that does both.
Yeah.
It's honestly a book that I keep coming back to over and over again. It's called Radical Focus by Christina Wodka, and it's about OKRs. And the first half of the book is a story, and the second half of the book is everything you ever need to know about OKRs. Like, it's transformational, honestly. And I recommend it to anyone.
I haven't read it. I'm going to get it. Thank you, Antonia.
You totally got me with the first part, the story, because like I really like it. So this, for example, why I like the Phoenix and Unicorn project, because like it was built in a story. So I could give it to people who usually don't like, wants to read these books. Yeah.
Really, really good.
Cool.
I mean, if you like other things, there's the entire books by Patrick Lencioni, Dysfunctions of a Team, The Best Team Player, and they're all told as stories as well. Also good. But that's more if you want more HR, more people ops, more a bit.
That's cool. Okay. I think this is so the good thing is like I can take a lot of stuff with me, so a lot of insights. And also like some books that I can read. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much. That was amazing. And I just had to hit the brakes because like we are almost at the hour, but I could have done this now for the next 2 hours. So
Same.
I repeat this.
Yeah, I had 2 more things, but they can be for another time.
Keep them in your pockets for next time.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
Thank you as well. So thank you everyone who is watching. I will be back, I think, in 2 weeks, and I don't know yet which kind of guest we have because I haven't decided yet. So it's a surprise. Let's see what will come. So I wish everyone a nice evening, and see you around.
Thank you.